Okay, so right now we're going to look at dependent and independent variables. Now this subject is important because it shows up in science and it also shows up in mathematics. So in order to understand it, we're going to look at some examples. So let's get started. Okay, here's an example. A researcher wants to know how much water a plant needs to survive. She obtains several plants of the same type and size. Then she gives them different amounts of water. Each plant gets the same amount of water every 3 days. After 28 days, she measures the height of each of the plants. What is the dependent variable and what is the independent variable? So first thing you probably need to do is envision what the researcher is doing. She wants to know how much water a plant needs to survive, so she has to get the same kind of plant and about the same size, because you don't want to use that as one of the things that could be a factor that's controlling the experiment. So, and then what she does is that she gives each of the plants that she has obtained different amounts of water, but she gives them that same amount every 3 days. And then at the end of the 28 days, she measures the height of the plant. Okay, so before we figure out what the independent variable and the dependent variable are, we need to find out what is an independent variable and what is a dependent variable. Okay, so an independent variable is a factor that you or the experimenter can change. And by default, a dependent variable is a change that is affected by the independent variable. It cannot be changed by you, the experimenter. Okay, so let's look at that example again. Okay, so we have the researcher who wants to know how much water a particular type of plant needs to survive. Okay, so what can be controlled by the experimenter in this case? Okay, so yes, it's the amount of water that the plant gets. So guess what? That's the independent variable. Okay, so looking at that same situation, what can't the experimenter change? I think you're going to get it. Right again, the height of the plants. So guess what? That is the dependent variable. The amount of water that each of the plant get, the experimenter can control, but she cannot actually determine how much a plant can grow based on that. You can't actually, an experimenter can't actually physically make a plant grow. So it's dependent upon her independent action. Okay, so let's look at another one. Good job. Okay, a scientist studies the impact of a drug on cancer. So what are some possible independent variables? Have a lot of things that we can look at, but probably when we're looking at a drug, it would be the dosage amounts, and it could be the time between the doses. But what can't the scientists change? What is the dependent variable? That scientist cannot determine the effects of the drug on the cancer. That is determined by the independent variable. So the scientist controls the independent variable. The dependent variable is controlled by the independent variable. Okay, so let's look at one more example. Good job. Okay, here's a chart. Oh, we don't like charts, but you're going to love this one. Here's a nice little hint about charts when you're asked what is the independent variable and what is the dependent variable. The independent variable 99.9% of the time, it's gonna be the horizontal graph. And more specifically, time. Time is commonly an independent variable because that is something that you can control. If you say, I want you to go for 5 seconds, just go for 5 seconds. Right here. Say, what is the speed at 5 seconds? We know it's 30. Okay, 30 meters per second. You can control the length of time. You can't, and the length of time will control how fast whatever this graph is representing is going. Okay, and so I gave you a hint on the dependent variable. The dependent variable is usually on the y-axis. Now, so the speed in this case was controlled by the time. Okay, so that, well, I love how math and science tie in together sometime. And that was so easy that I know you guys are ready to get out there on your own and determine some dependent and independent variables. Maybe you can even do some experiments and impress us. Okay, so that's a great job. Now it's your turn.